listening to your lesson this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. Last week we were talking about Joshua, and we had a lot of fun with some familiar faces. If you didn't get a chance to see it, definitely go back and watch it because it was really fun. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to do a little game before we do our lesson, and I promise it connects. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little listening game, okay? So what we're going to do is I have a couple of things to the side here, and I'm going to make noises with these things, and I want you to guess what they are. So I'm going to go ahead and get our first thing. We're going to close out the screen. What do you think that was? Maybe it was a drum. You guessed drum, you're right. That might look a little familiar from last summer. All right, so we have our next item, and we are going to close out our screen. See if you can guess it. All right, that might be a little bit of a harder one, but not just a bowl. Got some gold coins in that bowl. Oops, top one. That's what that is. All right, gonna get our next item. You guess what that is? That sounds like a rain stick. You guys remember those? Those are pretty cool. All right, let's get our next item. See if you can guess this one. That one's kind of hard. You guess what it is? That would be a lighter. That one was probably a little hard. It could have probably been just about anything. But we had to really listen, right? We had to really, really listen to what those items could have possibly been, and then guess what they were. So in our lesson, we're gonna talk about how Samuel didn't really know what he was hearing either. And he made a guess, and he was wrong too, until somebody told him. So let's jump into it. Last week we talked about Joshua. That was a whole lot of fun. We got to see some friendly faces and got to play around there. So this week we are going in and we're talking about Samuel. We are going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 3. So you can turn in your Bibles in the Old Testament to 1 Samuel chapter 3, and we are going to talk about him. Going to be pretty cool. So we're going to start in the beginning with him. His mom was Hannah. She wanted a son so bad. She went to the temple or a church and prayed for God to give her a son, and she prayed so hard for a son. And she told God, if you would just give me a son, I will raise him in your ways, and then I will give him back to you, and he will serve you all of the days of his life. So she prayed so hard, and God answered her prayer and gave her a son, and his name was Samuel. So she kept her promise, and she raised him in the way of the Lord, and then gave him back to God. Which I'm sure was very difficult for her to do, but she wanted to keep the promise that she made to God because God kept his promise and answered her prayer. So Hannah took Samuel back to the temple where the high priest Eli lived, and she took Samuel to Eli and told him, "This is my son Samuel. He will serve you well. I'm going to keep my promise to God, and he is going to serve the Lord." And Samuel understood what was going on, and he was actually pretty excited. He wanted to serve the Lord, and he wanted to do something great. So Eli said, okay, I could use a boy like him. So, and he was still pretty young. So Eli took Samuel in and taught him everything, showed him around the temple, taught him everything, explained where the places that he could go and the places that he could not go. And Samuel served Eli well. And he did all of this for working for the Lord. So there was one night when Eli went to bed and Samuel also laid down to go to bed. And all of a sudden, Samuel heard this voice. Now, Samuel knew about God, but he didn't know him yet. So he was still pretty young. So he didn't really know him, and he definitely didn't know how he sounded. And also, it was really rare for someone to hear the voice of God at that time. So Samuel went to bed, and he heard someone calling his name, Samuel. So, of course, he thought it was Eli. So he got up, jumped up, and he went to Eli's room, and he woke him up, and he said, Eli, I'm here. What do you need? Eli woke up. What are you doing? I didn't call you. Go back to bed. So Eli went back to bed, and he lay down, and he heard it again. Samuel. He popped up and he went back into Eli's room thinking it was Eli, and he woke him up and he said, Sir, I'm here. What do you need? And Eli, I did not call you. Go back to bed. I'm tired. So Samuel, okay. So he went back to bed, and for the third time, he heard it again. Samuel. So Samuel popped up and he ran into Eli's room and he said, Eli, sir, I'm here. You did call me. I heard you. You called me. So Eli sat up, and then he realized what was going on, because remember, he's this high priest. He knows. So he figured out that it was God that was talking to Samuel, this young boy. So Eli told Samuel, do what I say. Go lay back down, and when you hear that voice again, I want you to say, speak, Lord, your servant hears you. So Samuel went back to bed. He lay down, and then he heard it again. Samuel. So he sat up and he said what Eli told him to. He said, yes, Lord, your servant hears you. Whew, what God had to say to him was pretty important. So God told Samuel, I need you, I'm going to tell you this. Eli and his sons have really been messing up bad. I told Eli before that he needed to straighten it out, and he didn't. So he has disobeyed me, and now it has come his time for punishment because he didn't do what I said. So you can imagine Samuel was probably pretty shocked by this, right? He couldn't believe that the man that he was helping, that he was serving, that was supposed to be this high priest, wasn't doing what God was telling him to do. So he was probably pretty sad too. So he went back to bed. And the next morning, Eli went to Samuel and he said, so what did he say? What did God say? Because Eli couldn't believe that the Lord was speaking to this boy. Remember, doesn't happen all the time. So he was eager to hear what God had said. So Samuel was kind of hesitant. He didn't really want to tell Eli because, he's just this boy and he's serving Eli, this high priest, and he's probably kind of worried about what the reaction would be, and still pretty sad. So Eli told him, don't hold back. Tell me what he said. Because Eli kind of had an idea that it was probably about him. Because remember, God had already told him to stop doing these bad things and having his son stop doing these bad things way before, and he didn't do anything about it. So Samuel said, he said, your time has come for punishment. Why didn't you just change and stop doing these wrong things? Why didn't you just have your son stop doing what they were doing? That's what God told you to do, and you just didn't do it. And Eli, he completely understood. And he said, the Lord will do what the Lord will do. You know what? I deserve my punishment. He understood, and he accepted the responsibility. He had done a wrong thing, and he didn't make his sons do right. He allowed them to do the wrong thing, and that was his fault, and he knew that. So he said, I deserve the punishment. So Samuel went on to become this big prophet. He was a man of God, and prophet means that God told Samuel things, and he was able to tell him things sometimes before they happened. And Samuel would tell the people all of these things that God had told him, and they turned out to be true. So people understood that this was truly God that was talking to Samuel. And that's amazing. So he went on, and he was able to keep his promise to God to serve him all of his life, and Hannah kept her promise that her son would serve the Lord all of his life. Thanks so much for coming this week and listening to your lesson. That was so cool about Samuel and how God spoke to him and woke him up. And I'm sure Eli was a little bit annoyed, but hey, God's going to talk when he's going to talk, and we need to listen. So, and then obey what he says for us to do. So thanks so much. We will see you guys next week. Bye.